this week's drive, we get set for the long and dusty road to Dakar, find out who reigns in Spain, see out the NASCAR year with a bang, and line up for a pass in the rain. All this and more in this week's Drive. Before a racing driver gets signed to a professional team, especially in Formula One, he needs to be invited to a tryout session. It costs a small fortune in resources to put a car onto a track, even for a handful of laps, so potential drivers need to either demonstrate huge talent or put down a significant pile of money. And if this entrance exam goes well, the successful driver can look forward to many more sessions like it throughout the year, pounding around otherwise deserted tracks as the team develops the car and relentlessly practices the pit stop drill. We join Cristiano Da Matta and the Toyota team at one of these private sessions. A job well done. Now all that's left is to brief the engineers and analyze all the data from the session and convert it all to still more speed. We also have news of an unusual move by one of Formula One's most colourful characters. The rounds of driver changes between Formula One teams, the so-called silly season, usually starts about halfway through the year. But Colombian driver Juan Pablo Montoya has announced that he will race for McLaren a whole year ahead of his move. In the unusual move, McLaren revealed that Montoya will join them in the 2005 Formula One season after completing his contract with rival team Williams. Montoya was a title contender this season, ending up third overall behind Ferrari's six-times world champion Michael Schumacher and McLaren's Kimi Raikkonen. Rumours swept Formula One before the end of the season that the Colombian, one of the sport's most aggressive racers, was set to join McLaren in place of Scotsman David Coulthard. Although Coulthard's replacement hasn't been confirmed, he is tipped to move to Jaguar, joining Australian Mark Webber, although Webber himself is seen as a possible Williams signing. Coulthard spent the last week in November testing the team's 2004 car. He and Raikkonen were forced to race upgraded 2002 model cars when this year's racer failed stringent impact safety tests. Both David and his Finnish teammate Kimi scored a single win apiece this year. Both Montoya and his Williams teammate Ralf Schumacher each claimed 2 victories. The final race, number 36 of the 2003 NASCAR series, was run in Miami, where tennis star Serena Williams acted as the flagman for the race. Just 5 laps into the race, there was an accident that involved 3 drivers. Kevin Harvick's car lost grip and he tangled with Ryan Newman, who in turn forced Kurt Busch into the outside wall. Newman's car suffered considerable damage, but he was able to rejoin until another crash on lap 122 forced him out.
Looks like his day is over.
As a replay from the camera aboard Kurt Busch's car showed, his car was damaged as well. He lost 80 laps, but was running at the end. Lap 122 was a bad one for Brian Vickers too, as he lost his right front tyre. The same happened to several other drivers.
get loose. Yep.
The 9th caution flag came out for a collision between Mark Martin in number 6 and Ward Burton. Martin's car got loose and nudged Burton, and that sent them both into the wall on lap 245.
Bring down the 2003 season.
A blown tyre on the last lap cost Bill Elliott a second straight victory and gave Bobby Labonte the win. Elliott led for 189 of the 267 laps. He held off Labonte at a restart 9 laps from the end and pulled away, leading by about 5 car lengths, on the way to an easy win. But on the last lap, Elliott's Dodge slowed as his right rear tyre came apart. That sent pieces of rubber flying and ignited a fire in the wheel well.
Can't believe it.
Labonte led for only 1 lap, the last one. Britain's Richard Burns has been ruled out of next year's World Rally Championship by a brain tumour. The tumour, known as an astrocytoma, was discovered when Burns underwent CAT scans after collapsing at the wheel of his Porsche road car on his way to the final event of the year. The 2001 world champion will undergo radiotherapy treatment, with doctors confident that he will make a full recovery. But they also said that he will be unable to get back in a rally car for the 2004 season. The former world champion was on his way to Cardiff for the season-ending Welsh Rally when he blacked out at the wheel of his car. Burns was saved from a crash when fellow rally driver Marco Martin, who was a passenger in the car, grabbed the wheel and steered the car to safety. Burns was runner-up in 1999 and 2000 and won the title in 2001 with Subaru, before moving to Peugeot, finishing 4th this year. He was going back to Subaru for next year to join new world champ Petter Solberg. Scotsman Colin McRae is tipped to join Subaru after a year with Citroën. If he does, McRae will miss the first rally, the Monte Carlo, as he'll be competing in the Paris-Dakar Marathon. Speaking of the Paris-Dakar, the event's new chief, Patrick Zanaroli, has announced the route for the 2004 Marathon Rally Raid. And following criticisms, crashes, serious injuries and even some fatalities in past events, there will be an emphasis on safety in the future. Zanaroli, who replaced Hubert Auriol as the chief organiser last month, said special care will be taken to avoid the accidents involving spectators which have tarnished the race in the past. He said the organisers have strengthened speed controls in towns and villages, and the vehicle's compulsory GPS systems will record and control excessive speeding. Time penalties and fines will be handed out to those found to be speeding. The new Paris-Dakar boss called the 26th edition of the race, which will for the most part take place in its traditional countries, France, Spain, Morocco, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso and Senegal, a return to sources. The most difficult part of the rally, which will cover more than 11,000 kilometres over 17 stages, will be the 6 stages in Mauritania, which will have a mixture of short and long stages designed like an endurance race without assistance. The event starts on New Year's Day in France with a 1-mile prologue, before competitors head to Spain for a 25-kilometre racing stage the next day and 9 kilometres in Morocco the day after. Racing for real starts on the 5th day, well into the deserts of North Africa. At 1,055 kilometres, Stage 7 will be the longest of the rally, and it offers the field their first taste of the vast dune fields that lay ahead. The next 3 stages all start in Mauritania, before Mali hosts the first of its 2 stages. Those remaining at this point will enjoy a rest day in Burkina Faso. The field then travels back into Mali on Stage 12. They then return to Mauritania on Stage 13 for another 3 stages, the last of which ends in Senegal. The race then concludes with a 113-kilometre 17th stage that starts and finishes in Dakar, the shortest section in Africa. There will also be 2 stages where riders and drivers must navigate the old-fashioned way. No global positioning systems or satellite navigation allowed. In last year's event, production-based vehicles like the BMW were up against special on-off-road buggies, racing pickups and pre-production prototypes like the dominant Mitsubishi Pajeros. Hiroshi Matsuoka won the marathon after his teammate Stefan Peterhansel lost the lead in the final few days. In the motorcycle section, racers have to contend with the punishing and unrelenting conditions of sand, rock, heat and dehydration, while finding their way across some of the most inhospitable terrain in the world. Although Peter Hansel had previously won the event 6 times for Yamaha, Austrian bike builder KTM has become the brand to have. Some riders opt for the lighter, more nimble, more fuel-efficient but ultimately slower single-cylinder bikes, while others will choose the heavier but much faster twin-cylinder 950cc machines. This year, Frenchman Richard Sanct led almost from start to finish, but in January his opponents will include Italian Fabrizio Mioni and South African Alfie Cox, both highly experienced marathon racers. Breakdowns and crashes aren't the sole preserve of the drivers and riders, though. The Dakar is also raced by heavy trucks. Originally, they were simply backup vehicles, but they needed to be faster and faster just to keep up, and a racing class has existed for many years. The dominant vehicles are multi-wheel drive racers from KAMAZ in Russia and the Dutch DAF trucks. 563 vehicles have registered so far, 140 cars, 200 motorcycles, 58 lorries, and 165 assistance vehicles. The indoor Trial of the Nations brought together the best of Spanish, British and Japanese trials riding talent. Making their debut, the Japanese team, led by Takahisa Fujinami, struggled on the first lap. They improved on the second, but had to settle for third place with a total of 39 points. Great Britain were led by the 7 times world champion Dougie Lampkin, riding with Graham Jarvis and Steve Colley. The team scored 25 points on the first lap and 20 on the second for a total of 45. Britain had won the previous 2 outdoor Trials of the Nations, but would that be enough to score the indoor title ahead of Spain? Albert Capistani was first out for the Spanish. Each lap consisted of 12 sections, 9 of them observed hazards, with 2 double-lane races and a high jump. And in the event, the British turned out to be superior in just 1 single section, the double-lane race on the first lap. He was followed by Mark Friescher and then Adam Raga, each rider tackling the man-made obstacles in the Granada Sports Palace in southern Spain. It was the first time the 3 superpowers of trials riding had faced each other in an indoor team competition. At the end of the first lap, the Spanish team had a 6-point cushion, 31 points to Great Britain's 25. They gradually increased their advantage over the second lap and had victory in their pockets fully 5 sections from the end. Plenty to cheer then for the 7,000 fans. The 2004 Indoor Trials World Championship begins at Monza in Italy in 2 weeks' time, where one of the stars of the Spanish team, Adam Raga, will begin the defence of his world title. The 7th of 9 rounds in the Boxer Cup Series was run on a damp and misty day. As expected, local hero Sébastien Legrel claimed pole position on bike 45 as he tries to improve on his 2nd place in the championship. Starting second, number 99, Roberto Panicci of Italy, had a small crash in practice. 2 others near the front were Spaniard Fernando Cristobal on bike 16 and Englishman Tony Wastenage. In the dry, the first corner, the infamous Eau Rouge, can be taken flat out, even though the riders can't see where they're going. The spray would be bad enough at the front, but for following riders, conditions would be especially difficult on the demanding track deep in the Ardennes forest. On the first of 10 laps, it was Legrel from Cristobal, Wastenage and Panicci. The field of 35 riders all ride identical BMW R1100 bikes, only slightly modified for racing. As the 2 leaders opened a small gap, another Belgian, Dirk Bijlinks, on bike 4 was making his way up from 8th on the grid. An accomplished wet weather rider, he probably would have started on the front row if practice had been wet too. Now he has to filter his way through the traffic. Watch the start again, as some bikes have enough traction from their full wet tyres to lift the front wheel, despite the soaking track. Also, most riders stab their gear levers down to change up, as is normal for racing bikes. But Legrel hasn't changed his bike from its standard road riding layout and still clicks up to shift up. Watch again as Legrel brakes at the very last moment, sending his bike into a weave. On a dry track, this so-called backing in helps steer the bike, but in the wet it's just plain scary for the rider and those right behind him. With BioLynx firmly in touch with the lead group, Englishman Richard Cooper is 6th. The Belgian rain expert is closing up fast. The 32-year-old truck driver is keen to challenge his 28-year-old countryman Legrel, but the leader is highly experienced. He raced with the superstars of the 500 GP class in 2000, claiming a 19th place on a Honda. First to fall prey to BioLynx is Panici, as the Belgian effortlessly goes around the long way, on the outside and off the drier line. Legrel is under pressure as Englishman Wastenich looks for a different line through the chicane. The leaders remain in position, but series leader Hoffman on the green number 5 bike is down in 7th place and struggling for grip on the slippery track. The Swiss rider looks likely to lose his top spot in the championship to Legrel, who is just 4 points behind him. On the back section, Dirk BioLynx has scrabbled through to 2nd place, and on the long straight he closes right up on his countryman. At the end of the straight, the two Belgians brake as late as they dare, and it's truck driver BioLynx on bike number 4 who's in front, with Wastenich in 3rd. If he can sustain the pace, it looks as if BioLynx is going to romp away with the race. Watch again that braking move for the race lead, and the concentration on the faces of both BioLynx and Legrel. But Sebastian fights back and takes a tight line, going in faster, exiting slower and stealing away the racing line, a gamble that pays off. Behind them are other rain specialists, Spaniard Cristobal and Italian Alessandro Tomassoni, who won the wet Le Mans race on bike 69. BioLynx was 2nd at Le Mans, by far his best result of the year. Back on the brakes, and Legrel knows he's made a mess of it, downshifting too late and causing the rear wheel to skip and let BioLynx slip through easily into the lead again. A few corners later, it's Cristobal who's on the move, going past Wastenich to claim 3rd place. Unbelievably, at the same corner a lap later, Legrel seems to make another mistake, letting the Spaniard move into 2nd. Perhaps the Belgian has overworked his wet weather tyres on the drying track. But a lap later, BioLynx has slowed with mechanical trouble and Legrel is back in charge. But Cristobal has the better line and moves to the head of the field, with Tomassoni looking up the inside. Now it's the Italian who leads, with the Belgian 2nd, Spaniard 3rd and BioLynx hanging on to 4th. But ominously, bike 5 with Andy Hoffman aboard is now 5th. However, the Italian's spell at the front is brief, his departure spectacular, happily without any serious injury. Watch again as the big BMW gets onto the slippery white paint at the very edge of the track, snaps sideways and spits the hapless rider off in a classical high side, the sort of crash which usually hurts the most. Hoffman has quietly moved up the order, perhaps by saving his tyres in the first half of the race. He's managed to snatch the lead from Legrel, Cristobal and Tomassoni's teammate Panici, as BioLynx hangs on to the back of the leading pack. Legrel repeats his earlier offline move and slips through, although there's slight contact between the two bikes, for which he quickly apologises. Who had the line? It's hard to say, but there's no harm done. Onto the penultimate lap, and the leading 4 were giving it their all on a track which was neither wet nor completely dry. On that lap, Panici would have a go at the front, as would Cristobal, Legrel and Hoffman. The leading four would all look for that vital slipstream down the long straight, at the same time trying to avoid giving that advantage to a rival. On the brakes once more, and this time Hoffmann glides through on the inside as Panici weaves on a wetter outside line. Panici's bike is struggling for grip, and the Italian reacts fast to stay in control and second place. Things went horribly wrong for another Belgian in the race. Koen Vleugels will get no points from his home race, and his bike seems especially keen to get off the track and out of the way of the following riders. Once again, Hoffmann pulls off a surprise move to grab the lead again, and Englishman Weisnich dives up inside Cristobal to snatch third. But just when it looked like he would score his best result of the year and his only points beside Assen, he crashed out at a relatively slow speed. German Markus Barth made a rare mistake while third, dropping him to an eventual sixth as Cristobal and Panici grabbed an advantage. 19-year-old Richard Cooper won here last year, and he benefited from Barth's mistake too. On the run to the line, Hoffmann has a clear lead. Panici manages to scrabble ahead of Cristobal, and Cooper, with good drive out of the slow last turn, sneaks into third. Cooper's ecstatic, but Barth pounds his tank in frustration.
I think my experience helped me some. I noticed that during the race, my position wasn't good, but I always had the leaders in view, and I knew I still had some in reserve. Then in the last 5 laps, I got closer and closer without really having to go to the edge. On the penultimate lap, I thought that third or fourth would be good for the slipstream up there, and that's how it turned out. I came out of the slipstream and then did the final lap on the max, and the others didn't come close. That was nice.
The win moves the Swiss further ahead in the championship, 16 points ahead of Le Grel, who finished his home race in 4th place. Finally, ships on the Rhine River in Germany, one of the world's busiest waterways, were halted when Johann Traber set a very unusual world record. He rode a motorcycle on a 581-metre-long, 16mm thick high wire suspended 160 metres above the river. But that's not the main event. Running with grooved wheels and a trapeze and flying a European Union flag, he and an assistant performed various daredevil stunts as a warm-up. With no safety net, only the flimsiest of attachments kept the bike attached to the wire. 50-year-old Traber and his 19-year-old son teamed up, with the younger man acting as ballast, as thousands of spectators watched on from the hillside and below on the riverbank. Traber, from Breisach near the German-Swiss border, hails from a family steeped in the high wire tradition. His forebears have been tripping along the high wire since 1512. The evening performance was the latest in a series of high-risk ventures undertaken by multiple record breaker Traber, who has previously collaborated with US stunt legend Evel Knievel and worked on such films as the 1979 James Bond hit movie Moonraker. The father and son team swapped places for the main event, backed out onto the wire, and proceeded to swing around the cable 14 times, breaking their own record of 12 rotations. It was great, just beautiful. I have fulfilled my dreams, I carried out my ideas, Traber said after the stunt. But you wouldn't want to run out of petrol out there, would you? So you stay on track and up to speed. Make sure you catch next week's Drive.